Hey, welcome back. Today, I want to talk about how to recession proof your business. Look, there's lots of lessons that I've learned from going through these in 2008, 2009. The crash of the stock market, the kind of the cyber stocks and early 2000s, sales and loan in, what was that, maybe 92, 93. Not quite old enough to really remember the Jimmy Carter years and the Iran Contra stuff, but I'm going to go through 6 things that you can do. Now, I know that we just had the election, and a lot of you that are on the Trump side believe the economy is going to just take off and skyrocket. I actually am one of them as well, but that should not be the blinders to be put over you, thinking that you don't need to recession proof your business. Because the problem here is if you wait till a recession to try to recession proof your business, it's too late. And that's something that I learned at a very, very young age that I'm going to share with you. If this is your first time watching, look, my name is Bill Faith. I've done 37 startups, over $1 billion in sales. I've exited out of 31 of those, actually 29 of those 31 startups, and I've built a couple of $50 million companies, a couple of $30 million companies, multiple $10 to $20 million companies, and I'm on a mission to build a $25 million company with one employee right now. So what I want to do is I want to share a practical guide with you of real world lessons on how to safeguard your business when the shit inevitably is going to hit the fan. And it may not be a recession. It could be something like COVID. But what we do need to understand is that recessions typically hit every 8 to 10 years. We are well overdue for a recession. And maybe COVID, was our correction, but then we came out, on fire after COVID, and inflation has been at an all-time high. So it's something that we really need to prepare for now. And I'm going to share some of these personal experiences with you because I don't want you to wait. And one of the things that I'll share with you, the first thing that I'm going to go over, number one, is cash flow and reserves. And too many small business owners, and I kind of got caught in this, and I was very close on the brink of going bankrupt during the Great Recession. It had nothing to do with real estate, just FYI. But I had just expanded my ground transportation company into a new market, which was 6 hours from Nashville. And I had deployed a very heavy investment to lease property, improve the property, buy metal, which were more vehicles to be able to put in the service. And I opened up in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I put 8 vehicles there. So what that meant is that I had 3 sedans. I had 2 SUVs. Sedans at that time were about $45,000 a pop. SUVs were about $60,000. And then I had 250 or probably $125,000 to $150,000 minibuses. Now, did I pay cash for all of that? No, but I had to pay in advance for this lease to negotiate a sweeter deal, and I paid 6 months in advance. That kind of sucked. That was $5,000 a month. There goes 30 grand. I think I probably put close to 100 cash down on those vehicles. Then I had about $20,000 improvements, and if I remember correctly, about a $10,000 to $15,000 cash marketing budget. So all in, I'm in about $200,000 in cash, and I started that right at the beginning of November, right when I'm recording this podcast, of 2008. And then it took the big three, GM, Ford, those guys showing up in their private jets, in their limousines in front of Congress to testify why they needed bailouts. And literally the ground transportation space, I'm not going to say it went to zero, but we took a good 30 to 40% hit and lost almost 30% of our companies because I did not have enough cash flow and, most importantly, reserves at that time. I had depleted my reserves and I didn't have enough cash flow after I lost that 30 to 40%. It was slim pickings. And essentially in 2011, I ended up selling that business and exiting after I'd rebuilt it back up to get into more lucrative businesses. Number 2 thing, and this is something that a lot of people don't really focus on, and it's your core customers, your core relationships. So the majority of us in business do about 80% of our revenue off, it's the 80-20 rule, off 20 to 30% of our clients. And a huge component, typically like 50, 60% of that top 20% ends up being your top 5 to 10% of your customers. But if you don't have a rock solid relationship with them, it's easy for them to move on. And what happens is pricing strategies really, when people, because they get fearful of what's going to happen to their business when times get tough, it's typically a race to the bottom. They lower their prices to be competitive. And what happens is that makes it attractive for the consumer. If they can get a similar or equivalent product to what you're offering, they end up going to your competitors. And that's not something, that we want to have happen. So the stronger the relationship that you have with your customers, the more likely you are going to be able to sustain that customer. And because they have trust, because they have relationship, because you have history. So that's one of the things that I really implore into my business plans from the onset as I'm growing a business or I'm retaining a business. Because the two most important things in business, folks, are customer acquisition and customer retention. But nobody puts customer retention plans into their business plan or into their SOPs or within their team. And if they do, then they take a step back. And unless you're a CEO, and in my opinion, you better be a $20 million company plus before you kind of migrate out of day-to-day into that CEO role. I mean, you want to do E-Myth, you want to work on your business versus in it, but you need to have the strongest relationships with your customers. That's one of the fail points that I see with small businesses, is that literally that small business owner, once they get in that comfort zone, maybe they're at 5 million. And if you got a 20% margin, you're pulling $1 million in net for the first time ever. And you get complacent, you get fucking lazy. And then you start losing touch with your customers. Do not let that happen. Number 2 is to really fortify those relationships with your customers before you need them. Okay, so number 3 is lean operations. So as you get into that $5-10 million range, and this happened to me as well, I started making money and I started getting lazy. I started getting more comfortable, right? Well, what happens is then you're hiring people to do stuff. You hire 2 people to do the job of 1. And you're not exploring automations. You're not really staying to that pricing integrity and what I call the profit integrity, and the business gets fat. And you really have to focus on lean operations. And right now in the world that we live in, there is a lot of ability for us to outsource overseas, to use virtual assistants. There's a lot of ability to use automations in software, whether it's, things like ChatGPT-4, softwares like HubSpot, things of these nature. Salesforce, you can automate a lot of sales processes, marketing processes, operational processes. And the leaner that you can keep your business, the more nimble you're going to be. Do not wait for a recession to lean out your business. One of the biggest tips that I'll give you is you should do what I call the lean analysis. And really, I call it the fat analysis, to really lean out the company about every 6 months. And I do this internally. So I own 7 businesses today. And I go through and I do this internally, either on my own for the small businesses, or if I do have a staff, a COO or a GM or whatever, then I'm going through it with them as well. Number 4, diversification of your revenue streams. And I can't emphasize this enough. I know it's cliche. I know a lot of people talk about this. And what I'm talking about for your core business, in my opinion, you need to have at least 3 vertical integrations. If you can take your core business and bolt on 1, 2, and 3, and they can be small. Let's say that you're a $5 million small business and you can bolt on, a simple $250,000 or $500,000, small business onto it. And then, 6 months later, you bolt on another 500,000 and you bolt on another 500,000. Now you turned into a $6.5 million business. But most importantly, you have diversification of revenue and profit. So what I'm looking at when I'm trying to do these diversifications is something that is low risk, very small investment, and high profit margin. So it doesn't have to be high revenue, but I want it to be high profit margin. So, I just look at, the short-term rental business, which is my most public business that most of you know that I'm in right now. So I have my own property portfolio. Then I started doing co-hosting and built a co-hosting management company, right? So that's a vertical integration. Market My STR, I launched with my partner, Scott Hill. It's the #1 all-in-one marketing platform for short-term rental owners, hosts, co-hosts, and property managers. And that's a vertical integration. Kenny Bedwell and I started STR VAs together. That's a vertical integration. I built the largest conference, the STR Wealth Conference in the entire industry. That's a vertical integration. all based around my core business. And let's don't forget about my coaching business, my masterminds, build short-term rental wealth. So that's a lot of vertical integrations, which are all surround the core reason that I'm in this industry, which is my personal portfolio that I'm investing into. I did the same thing when I was in the last business prior to this, the ground transportation space. And in the ground transportation space, not only did I provide ground transportation, but I was, doing private jet charter. I had my own mechanic shop, my own body shop that we were doing. So I always create these vertical integrations in every single business. The next one, number 5, is something that all of us hate doing. And I know you do as well. It's planning for the inevitable. And that kind of goes back to number 1 when we talked about reserves. Planning for the inevitable is absolutely critical. Now, nobody could have predicted COVID. I get that, right? But really what we need to do from that reserve standpoint, from a cash flow standpoint, from managing our finances, we need to understand the inevitable. The other thing is you need to have the plan if your key man or woman leaves. Like, do you have key man or woman insurance if they were to pass away or die unexpectedly? Do you have a backup plan if you lose your COO or your CFO or your general manager or just your number 1 salesperson? The salespeople, as you grow a business and you start implementing salespeople into the core fiber of your business, is really where most small business owners become susceptible. And that's because you get out of touch with your customers and you're not involved directly in the sales process, which means that your sales reps or your account managers, if you have them, whoever it is that is not you that fortifies that relationship, ends up owning the relationship and they can take it with them. I don't care how strong your non-compete is. I don't care how strong your non-solicitation is. If they fortify those relationships, the customer, if they want to go with them and then you try to stop them legally, you're going to lose them anyways. So you need to own those relationships. That's planning for the inevitable. The last one is kind of an odd one for most of you, most likely, but it's pivoting. And what I mean by pivoting is pivoting your core business model. And if that's not working, as was my business, Limo University, that I had to shut down because the ground transportation business went from screaming the best ever to zero in less than 30 days. Zero in less than 30 days. And I was the first vendor in that industry to literally say, I'm going to give all of this away for free, but I'm going to stay here and I'm going to work double time, take those 2 extra steps to help you guys through this crisis. So I had no revenue coming in. So I took my skill sets, I took that business model and then pivoted it directly into short-term rental wealth. And that's a pivot that I was able to take skill set, take service, and really just rebrand and apply the same business concepts, the same coaching, that really is applicable to any business, HVAC companies, attorneys, real estate investors, whatever it is. It's the same business principles, believe it or not, whether it's customer acquisition, customer retention, marketing, finances, operations, building SOPs, all of that stuff. Really, there's some standard practices that transition across. So pivoting is a big deal. I decided to pivot. I still have my foot, really probably 1 toe left in that previous industry as I migrated into this one and grew a substantial business. But that was the pivot. And here's what happens with pivoting. It doesn't matter if it's in a recession. It doesn't matter if times are great. It doesn't matter any time that you decide to pivot. Most of you get stuck getting ready to get ready. Let me say that again. Most of you waste too much fucking time. And you're not decisive enough and you don't make a decision. You can go back and watch the last 3, 4, 5 YouTube videos here on the channel, and you're going to see that one of the biggest traits for successful entrepreneurs is speed. And speed and decision making and getting to execution. So if you are contemplating pivoting, make a decision quickly. You cannot go back and forth, by any means. You need to make sure that you are decisive. Those are the 6 things: cash flow and reserves, focusing on core customers, lean out your operations, automations, diversification of your revenue streams internally and externally, planning for the inevitable, and pivoting. Start planning this now. Do not wait for the shit to hit the fan. And most importantly, if you found any value in this, make sure you smash that subscribe button, because I've got the next video is something you are not going to want to miss. I promise you. We'll see you there.